So remember, after this one, social tonight, and hope you all can stick around and we get to know each other a little more. Our next speaker, Ty Robinson of Intergalactic Hydrogen, which has to be one of my most favorite company names ever. And he does renewable energy, energy efficiency, and cleaner fuels work. He's one of the best vehicle converters on the planet. He can convert pretty much any vehicle to any fuel, and he does a lot of multi-fuel vehicles, and they're spectacular. There's no other word for it. He's a pioneer in this field. He's going to be recognized for a long time for his contributions. There's no question about it. He works with consumers and government officials. He's one of those folks who just likes to build stuff. It's rare to find somebody like that who's also a great speaker, and he is. So I'm really looking forward to what he has to say here. And just a little sidelight about Ty, he was a champion athlete. I didn't know this. He was an aerialist on the U.S. freestyle ski team. And he was in the junior nationals and the nationals. And also he grew up in a solar-powered home. That's how he kind of got interested in this stuff. So let's welcome Ty Robinson.
Thank you, Mike. Hey, thanks a lot, Mike. Yeah, my name's Ty Robinson, and I'm here at the end of the day to come visit with you guys, teach you about some cleaner fuels. And how's everyone doing today? Pretty good one? Everyone's happy? Yeah? Got a little stretch out? Got feeling good? All right, cool. Well, they gave me a couple toys to play with, so I'm going to check them out. But yeah, my company is Intergalactic Hydrogen. For those of you that don't know us, yeah, we work with cleaner fuels. There's a lot of them out there. We like to work with all of them because there's a place for every one of them. And we do renewable energy products. We install solar panels and wind generators. And we do energy efficiency audits and help people reduce their energy consumption. Most recently, I worked as the energy conservation director at Snowbird ski area. Helped them save hundreds of thousands of dollars in electricity usage every year from here on out. So they really like saving that energy. It makes a lot of good sense. But today we're going to talk about some fuels and what's available. And we're going to start with a little bit of a fuel history. We're going to start back at the beginning. That's a good place to start. 1809 was the year the very first internal combustion engine was in an automobile. Does anybody know what fuel it was using? Someone said it. It was hydrogen. It was actually hydrogen with carbon monoxide. They called it Towns gas or producer gas. Today we call it syngas. So it's hydrogen with carbon monoxide. It was in a big balloon sitting between the driver's legs. It had 4 wheels. They steered with the feet. And there was no distributor then, so there was a hand crank to spark it. Every spark was a hand crank. So you had a big balloon of hydrogen between your legs, and that's how they drove around. So you're going to hear me saying... You're going to hear me talk about paving back to hydrogen. This is why, because this was the first fuel. We're actually returning back full circle to all the fuels that engines were designed to run on. So now let's go a little bit further into the future now. The 1850s was when petroleum was basically found in Europe. And then a little bit later than that, we got 1868 was when I think Standard Oil was first founded. There's a lot of different iterations of Standard Oil. But at that time, there was already hydrogen in Europe and in the U.S. well, America or whatever it was. It was the United States of America then, it was, wasn't it? So there was hydrogen pipelines already, though. There was hydrogen pipelines in Europe, and there was hydrogen pipelines in America. And they called it Towns gas or producer gas. They got the hydrogen from smoldering coal in an oxygen-deprived state. So you got the hydrogen and you got the carbon monoxide. They put it in the pipelines. It went around. The lamplighter, his job, as soon as the sun went down every night, he went and turned on and got light. You know, that's how you had street lights. That's what we had. Well, now we keep going further into the future a little bit more. We go to 1870s. Nicholas Otto. You guys hear that name? Otto. Anybody know what it means? Like the Otto cycle of the four-stroke internal combustion engine. Nicholas Otto developed it. Well, that was his name. But he was the one that put the four-stroke internal combustion engine. Every vehicle on the planet today basically runs on the Otto cycle. You have a few weird ones. You got the Wankel motor, and you got the Prius that runs on the Atkinson cycle, which is a lean burn. But Nicholas Otto, at the time, he chose to use hydrogen as the fuel, not because it was more available, because there was pipelines, but because it was safer than the new alternative. The new alternative was benzene. Benzene is so toxic. Benzene's in gasoline, and it's so toxic, the little thimbleful of benzene, you distribute that, it would kill a whole city block full of people. Everybody around this building right now, you could die from a thimbleful of benzene. Well, that was the new alternative. Nicholas Otto didn't want to use that. He knew how dangerous it was, so he chose to use hydrogen in his engine. So again, that's the roots of it. Well, now we go a little bit more into the future, and let's get to Rudolf Diesel. In the 1890s, he started developing his engine, the diesel engine, the compression ignition engine. It was a four-stroke engine too, but instead of having a spark plug to ignite it, it ignited the fuel through compression. By compressing the fuel, it would ignite and drive down the road. Well, now Rudolf Diesel did something kind of cool. He put his engine into a race car, and that race car at the 1900s World Fair won the race. There was all these cars going for fuel efficiency. I think it was a 100-mile race. Well, the car with his engine in it won because it's so efficient. They didn't have to stop for fuel. It was durable. For many good things. So his engine spread like wildfire all over the planet. All over. For industrial applications, for farming, the diesel engine was used. Well, those petroleum guys, those darn petroleum guys, they were right on the heels of that. They were running around wanting to sell their new fuels. They had powdered coal, coal fines. They had different blends of petroleum oil, and this new blend they called diesel to run in the diesel engine. Well, Rudolf Diesel was so disturbed by that, he was following right around the petroleum guys around the world and telling everybody who's using his engine, don't put their trash, don't put that stuff in the engine. It's designed to run on your local oil crops. Whatever oil crop you can grow, whether it's soy oil or corn oil or hemp seed oil, whatever you got, use your local crops oils. That's what the engine's designed to run on. Well, he was so vocal about this that he ended up dead. Bullet hole, suicide note, not in his handwriting, in the river. Yeah, I think someone killed him. It kind of leads that way. So that was, that's kind of the petroleum interest, and it's going from Europe now, spreading around the world. Now let's get into the U.S. and let's talk about what happened here. At the beginning of the turn of the 1900s, Henry Ford was already selling vehicles. He was selling vehicles for about $8,000. They were, to the ultra-wealthy, got to buy his automobiles. They were really nice. Well, then along came the Model T. In 1908, starts rolling off the assembly line for $843. That's a big price difference. So now a lot more people can have it. Well, the Model T was painted with soy-based paint. The convertible tops and the seat cushions you sit on, corn fiber. All the knobs and the steering wheel, all the plastic parts inside was made from furfural. That's what Ford called it. But furfural is corn oil plastic. So they were using corn oil plastic for that, and obviously is putting ethanol in the fuel tank, because that's what came from his farmers. Well, now we got some other things going on right around this time, and this is kind of where the fuel history interconnects with kind of the banker history. The date was December 23rd, 1913. That was the day that 4 major laws were changed in this country. Basically, every law passed since then you could say is unconstitutional, because they changed the way our senators are voted in. Instead of the state electorate, now they're voted in by the popular vote. And we, the people, are only supposed to elect the House of Representatives. Those are the only people, because there's 3 different populaces to vote 3 different electorates. Well, besides that, some other things changed. They created the Federal Reserve. They took money off the gold standard, created the IRS. Well, who did this is what's very important. Special session of Congress is first only supposed to be called in the time of war. We weren't at war. We were at Christmas, so everybody was at home with their families. So of the 14 people that showed up for this special session of Congress, which should, we could null and void it all if anyone had the balls to stand up to it, because it wasn't a time of war. Well, the 14 people showed up. That was it. From the House and the Senate, that's all that showed up to vote on this special session. 9 of those 14 people, their plane tickets were paid for to get there by Rockefeller. Henry Rockefeller's paid to get them there. Well, now let's look at what the laws did. They created the IRS, which was beginning as a flat tax. Top 10% of the wealth of the nation, flat tax, you get taxed. Well, that's all of his competitors. And now let's create the 501c3, which is where he put all of his money. All of his companies became nonprofits overnight. No, nonprofits, not that they don't make money, you just can't show that you make any money, so you have to pay it all to your employees. So that's his friends and his family that he's put in charge of all the companies that he's now made as nonprofits. So by hijacking our country, he's taxing his competitors to hurt them and propping himself up. And what happens after this is really disturbing, because in this country, petroleum was starting to be used Standard Oil was making kerosene from the crude oil. Kerosene replaced hydrogen as the lamplighter fuel in this country. But when they were done making the kerosene, they threw the rest into the Mississippi in the middle of the night because it was trash to them. It was in the way. They wanted to get rid of it. So they were dumping it in the Mississippi in the middle of the night. Well, one of J.P. Morgan's scientists found out, well, when you're done making kerosene from the crude oil, from the leftovers you can make gasoline. So J.P. Morgan went to Rockefeller and said, hey, he bought into the petroleum interest. So let's make gasoline from that stuff instead of dumping it in the river in the middle of the night. So Rockefeller and Morgan, got together. He's buying into the interest. Now Morgan goes over to Ford and says, Ford, buddy, you got to stop putting ethanol in your cars, and you got to stop telling people they can put alcohol in them. And Ford's like, step off. I'm not putting your trash in my cars. This comes from my local farmers, not putting your trash in there. So since Ford didn't go willingly, we had Prohibition. Prohibition was funded by Morgan. J.P. Morgan funded the Women Against Drinking and the Mothers Against Alcohol and created Prohibition. Prohibition wasn't about keeping people from drinking. It was about keeping them from brewing their own fuel. So in the few short years of Prohibition, Rockefeller and Morgan were able to introduce the legislation that used this newfound tax dollar. Actually, they used our American tax dollars, which the federal government's not even supposed to be collecting, but that's a whole other fight. But for this to work out, they had the mechanism to fund the government now. Well, Rockefeller designed it, and now he's manipulating it too, because he made the legislation to take the federal tax money, the tax dollars, to create the refineries, to create the distribution, to create the dispensers, to sell his trash. That all happened during Prohibition. A couple other cool things happened during Prohibition, though, too. All the speakeasies were still getting alcohol, and it was coming in the back of cars, from the moonshiners. Well, they're putting it in their cars, and to hide it from the cops, they started putting it in their tanks, in the gas tanks. So they were running on it as well, and that, if they got pulled over, they didn't have a big barrel in the back of alcohol that was actually in the tank. Well, when they did that, they started figuring out, well, you can make an engine run a lot better on alcohol than you can on gasoline. So they started increasing the compression and playing with it. Well, you get more horsepower, you get more torque, you get better miles per gallon out of ethanol than you do out of gasoline, than you ever could on an engine, if you tune it properly. So that's what they were doing, and now they got risky, started putting the tanks, besides just the fuel tank filled with ethanol, but putting the barrels back in, because now they could outrun the cops, because cops are running on trash, they're running on gasoline. So that's where we got stock car racing. So the roots of NASCAR actually came from Prohibition. So all this is just kind of a fuel history. And now, we get into the 1970s, and there's this thing called the Clean Air Act, and some other things happened. Do you guys know where the EPA came from? I'm sorry? It was the Nixon administration. And some people, you might know a little bit about Nixon. I think he was a little bit of a lie and a cheat, but that's where we got the EPA. So enough about the fuel history. That's kind of to set you up and where we're at today. So now let's talk about all these fuels and where they work. We need them all. There's not enough of any one fuel is going to satisfy all of our energy needs. And there's positives and there's negatives of each and every fuel, but they're going to all work somewhere. So let's work with them all. And how do we really use them all is we need a multi-fuel vehicle that can run on whatever fuels you got. And, that's going to get us to the fuel stores with choice at the end of this presentation. But, this is, it's pretty imperative. You start bad-mouthing one thing or one technology that's maybe not what you're working on today, that hurts the whole industry. Bad-mouthing them only helps the guys that are already in control. And I think you know who's already in control of our fuel. So let's talk about this fuel hierarchy pyramid. This is kind of my favorite thing to talk about, is because up at the top is renewable hydrogen. That's the very top. That's the ultimate. Solar-produced hydrogen. Solar meaning wind or wave, whatever renewable energy, that's solar. It all comes from the sun. Even crude oil comes from the sun. Well, maybe. But below that, you got methane, and there's a couple different kinds of methane, too. You can get methane from underground, but even that is biological. But you can also get, there's an untapped source of methane in this country from the landfills and the sewage treatment plants, the cow farms, the pig farms, all those feedlots. That methane's just escaped into the atmosphere, folks. We need to collect it and burn it. And then below that, we've got some other fuels. We've got the liquid biofuels like biodiesel and ethanol. We've got propane. We've got diesel and gasoline and kerosene and jet fuel, Jet A. Well, all those are really long hydrocarbons. Lots of hydrogen in them and lots of carbon in them. But they're much more valuable to us if we don't burn them. So those long string hydrocarbons down at the bottom of the pyramid, those are much more valuable to us if we don't burn them. But then as a sidebar is the electric. Now there's a lot of different electric options. We're going to talk about some of them as well. Now, no matter what fuel you use, it's best to use a little less of it. You guys, if you go walk around downtown New Mexico, you might find this painting on the side of the building. It's one of my favorites. Now, even if you buy your gasoline and your diesel at an all-American fuel store, it's still best to not burn it, because a gallon of crude oil can make $35 worth of plastics. This plastic right here, you can make $35 worth of it out of 1 gallon of crude oil. And you could recycle this plastic again and again. You could make more wealth for our economy by making a durable good. You could make carbon fiber for tennis rackets and skis. You could make nylon for your shoelaces. All this, you can make synthetic pharmaceuticals out of petroleum if you want to. That's not really recyclable, but the durable goods are. And those durable goods, you make them, use them again and again and again, make more wealth for our economy. Well, right now, 1 gallon of crude oil makes less than a gallon of gasoline. So even if we sold a gallon of gasoline for $35, it'd still be wealth depletion, because we're burning it and putting it in the atmosphere where we can't use it again. Actually, we're putting it in the air as pollution, which is harmful to our lungs and our kids' lungs. So what we have right now is we have a wealth depleting economy, because they're selling quantity over selling quality. They're selling quantity, barrels and barrels of oil a day, instead of building quality durable goods. Well, in this wealth-depleting economy, we've got a few very wealthy and powerful people that are becoming more wealthy and more powerful than you can ever imagine. Meanwhile, every one of us that's putting a gallon of gasoline in our tank, every gallon you put in is like tightening the shackles around your ankles tighter and tighter. You're becoming enslaved. This isn't happening by accident. We're in a wealth-depleting economy, folks. We got to change that. We got to choose the fuel that creates wealth for us. And the petroleum right now is depleting that. It's really sad. So there's a lot better things we can do with crude oil, so let's not burn it. That's kind of the point there. But we have some options. And the greatest thing about these options is that they're cleaner, they're safer, they're local, they increase our nation's security, they benefit the health of not only us people, but other living things on this planet. And it supports our local economy. Now you can see a bunch of different fuels on this here too. They've got biodiesel, it's cheaper than diesel. They got propane. This vehicle's actually, there's an electric charging spot right there, so electric cars could come and charge up. So this is a great station. You've got choice when you come to it. But to really utilize that choice, you need a multi-fuel vehicle. So like that vehicle right there can run on hydrogen or natural gas or ethanol, or it could use gasoline if you had to, but it's going to fill up with the cheapest fuel that it finds, whatever station it stops at. Now here's the electric vehicles, and a bunch of different electric vehicle options you have. You have neighborhood electric vehicles, like that little yellow car. But above that is a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. A lot of you are familiar with the Prius and other hybrid vehicles. Well, you can plug them in, and you can use power from the grid or power from solar panels or wind generators to charge up the batteries so you get further range on the electric instead of the gasoline or whatever fuel you're using in them. And the neighborhood electric vehicles, like that little bicycle, that's a great thing for the last mile or the last 2 miles. If you are commuting in and out of a big city because you live out of town, well, the most valuable real estate's right downtown, and it's hard to find a parking spot there anyway. So park outside town a little bit and ride your bicycle in the last couple miles. That way you save the valuable real estate for those shops selling Gucci shoes and stuff. Now you've got pure electric vehicles too, like the Chevy Volt there might, who knows what it's going to end up being, but a pure electric vehicle only runs on electric. Now think about this though too, that a fuel cell electric vehicle, FCEV, fuel cell electric vehicle, it's also an electric vehicle, but instead of using batteries, it's using hydrogen as the fuel. So you can fill it up real quick. You can fill it up in a couple minutes instead of having a charge, whether it takes 10 minutes or 2 hours or 8 hours or 12 hours. It takes more time to charge batteries. But when you can fill up with a fuel, it's a lot quicker. That's what people are kind of used to. You can fill up kind of quick. So a little point here is talking about using in these hybrid electric vehicles. You've got a diesel electric hybrid that's available in Germany. That's a pretty cool thing, but it's not available in the U.S. We've got gasoline electric hybrids like this Toyota Highlander, but when you have a hybrid vehicle that's getting better miles per gallon, whether it's gasoline or diesel, that's just doing less bad because you're still using the dirty fuel. Now, collecting that methane that I talked about before at the pig lots and the cow farms and the sewage treatment plants, collecting that methane and keeping it from escaping into the atmosphere and actually burning it as a fuel, that's actually doing more good because methane is 23 times more potent of a greenhouse gas than CO2. But when you collect methane and you burn it in an engine, the exhaust out the tailpipe, the CO2 is less than a quarter of the CO2 that you would get by burning gasoline. So it's far better to collect the methane and burn it as a fuel. And that's why I say it's actually doing more good. Some of you guys seen this car maybe, and it's a cool name, so I thought I'd put the pictures in here because not quite sure what's happening with this car, if they're making them or not. But every new company's got different problems, but a pure electric car does have a good place. This is a great one because it's using lithium-ion batteries. You get good range, you get good power, you can go a long distance, you can charge them pretty quick. You're going to have to replace the batteries though, and it's going to be a hefty bill to replace those batteries when they wear out. But there is a good place for this vehicle, and it's maybe around town or a short commute from your house to your work. This vehicle is not going to be very practical for going the whole country though, cross country. Because if you drive 200 miles or 300 miles and then you have to charge for 8 hours before you can go another 200 or 300 miles, charge another 8 hours, that's going to take you a while to get across country. So those fuels are actually a little better for driving as your daily driver all over the country, wherever you want to go. So now we're going to get on to the next, besides the electric fuel, here's the first fuel I'm going to talk about because it's it's one of the worst ones down at the bottom of the fuel hierarchy pyramid. This is actually President Bush's truck. It's powered by propane. Could also use gasoline if you had to. This is one of his ranch hands from the Crawford Ranch. And propane's been used successfully as a motor fuel since the 50s or so. It used to be really cheap. The really cool thing about propane is it's kind of like recycling because when you get propane, it's all the tail ends of the refining processes. No matter what you're getting, all the tail ends is what they combine together to make propane. I mean, that's one way to get it. But so propane's kind of like a recycled fuel. It's cleaner than gasoline, it's cheaper than gasoline, so that's good. It's local, so it supports our local economy. But it's kind of a dead-end fuel. It's not leading to anything greater. It's not leading to anything better. So we can use it locally, but we don't want to put too much emphasis on it. Here's another fuel that's getting a lot of notoriety today, or veg oil, straight veg oil or waste veg oil, recycled veg oil from the grease traps of America. You can use that stuff. Now this is a heated tank in the back of this Dodge truck. It's insulated as well. Now if you're getting your grease from a place like this your barrels are covered in snow, well that stuff's going to be a little solid. So you're going to have to heat it up before you can even filter it. Once you heat it and filter it, get all the chunks out, then you can put it in this tank and you can run it straight. But I've got some cautions for you about doing this. When you take restaurant grease, most places by law have to recycle or get rid of their restaurant grease. They cycle through it about every 30 days or so because the more you heat and cool and heat and cool and heat and cool that cooking oil to dip your french fries in or whatever, it becomes carcinogenic. So it becomes carcinogenic, so it's not good to be putting food in because then it goes into our bellies and you put the carcinogens into our bellies. Well, now think about what you're doing if you're going to burn it in an engine. You're actually putting those carcinogens out in the air for all of us to breathe, in our lungs. That's bad, folks. That's real bad. So using the waste restaurant grease in a system like this is a no-no. I mean, you're going to put the carcinogens into the air. But if you take the waste veg oil and you get the chunks out of it and then you process it into biodiesel, do the chemical process to separate the glycerin, you also separate the carcinogens. So then I understand it's a much better fuel. But be careful. But right now you can get straight veg oil. You can buy it wholesale. You can buy it. You can get agreements from different farmers and whatnot. You can buy canola oil. You can buy flaxseed oil. There's a lot rapeseed oil. A lot of these different oils, you can buy them by the gallon for cheaper than you can buy diesel. So yeah, it's a cheaper fuel. So it's something you can do. And that raw virgin oil, that stuff that hasn't been cooked with yet, the raw virgin oils, those are great to use. Those are the best thing to put through a diesel engine. It's what Rudolph Diesel developed it to run on, so good idea. There he is. Here's the man, Rudolph Diesel. Now, when he developed his engine, you can see pictures of it there. It had thicker fuel tubing and thicker lines, so you could run that thicker fuel through it without heating it even. And if we designed our engines, our compression ignition engines, and built them on the assembly line for thicker fuel, you wouldn't even need to process it into biodiesel. But today's petroleum-based diesel is a lot thinner than veg oil. And to mimic that, we've got this process called biodiesel. So we take a little bit of methanol, or a little bit of ethanol, actually gives you better cold weather performance. You mix it with lye, and you do a chemical reaction with the used restaurant grease or the raw virgin oils, and it splits it apart, splits the fats from the glycerin. You get the glycerin out, you can make soap from that, take the fats out, and you get biodiesel. It's a great fuel. Now there are some cold weather concerns people have about how does it work in cold weather, and yeah, biodiesel has a higher gel temperature than petroleum diesel. But there's great solutions to that as well. You can do additives. One of the great things is you can cold filter it. If you bring your biodiesel down to the cloud point, run it through a filter, get rid of all the crystals, you have now a fuel that will work to -40. That's well below what petroleum diesel will work at. So actually, you've got biodiesel that'll outperform petroleum diesel. It's slicker. They call it lubricity. It's not maybe not a real word, but it's slicker. So your old worn-out diesel engines, you get better fuel economy. You get more power out of them when you run biodiesel. It's incredible. It's a good thing to do. There's a green Hummer project we did. There's a snowcat you can use. There's Josh Tickell. If you guys have heard of him, he's got a new movie called Fields of Fuel. There's a bucket of biodiesel he's putting in that Datsun that he put a diesel engine in. And so there's a great place for biodiesel. It's a great place. We're going to be using diesel engines on this planet a long time to come. Now, it's kind of finite, though, if you're making it from crops that we grow. But the greatest thing about biodiesel is that we can make it from algae. Algae is an incredible thing. If you guys haven't heard about this, I got to tell you. Algae, we can do 4 things. Clean up 4 problems with one swift solution, algae. Okay, we grow algae from the exhaust from all the power plants. All of our coal-fired power plants are belching out smoke and exhaust that, I would say it's a little harmful to our health to breathe that stuff. Well, if we pump all the exhaust from the coal-fired power plants through the beds that are growing algae, the algae actually sucks up that carbon dioxide. They suck up the pollution. They suck it up to grow off of them. So they grow, and they grow really fast, really, really fast. Well, when you grow algae, you can manipulate the light and the dark cycles and actually have it produce hydrogen. So we produce hydrogen from it to use as a fuel or hydrogenate fats and oils if you really want to do that. Whatever you want to do with hydrogen, you're free to do with it. But then algae is about 70% oil by weight and volume. It is almost all oil. It's so much oil that you harvest the algae, and they grow really quick. So every day you're harvesting 3/4 of your algae because the next day they're growing again. But you harvest it, and you squish it, you press it, get all the oil out. Well, you take that oil and you make it into the biodiesel, you make it into the jet fuel, you make it into all that stuff that you want to run our compression ignition engines on. And then when you're done with the leftovers from pressing it, it's like powdered greens, it's like spirulina, it's food. Okay, so you clean up the air, you make hydrogen, you make biodiesel, and you make food. And we can do it right now. A lot of universities are studying this, doing it in small scale. It'd be pretty easy to ramp up. We need some money, though. We need a lot of money to do it. Gonna need huge investment to do it, but that potential of making algae, growing algae, we can make a lot of biodiesel from, as well as those other products. So that's a great thing. Now we're gonna move on to the next fuel, is ethanol. What are some of the problems with ethanol? What are some of the concerns with ethanol? Anybody want to tell me something? Anybody? Yes?
I think I heard only 25 gallons per acre productivity. It's very wasteful of corn.
So one comment is that it might only produce 25 gallons of ethanol per acre of corn, so it might be wasteful. Yeah, there's a lot of concerns about this right now. Now, the combined report from the Department of Energy and the Department of Agriculture, they did a combined report, said if we dedicated every acre of cropland in this country to growing the oil crops to make ethanol and biodiesel from corn and soybean, we could only displace 30% of the gasoline with ethanol from corn, and we could only displace 2% of the diesel with biodiesel from soybeans. So folks, that's how finite it is. The liquid biofuels are very finite. And that's if we used all the cropland. We're not even growing any food. So, obviously, it's very finite. So, now the concern comes to, what crop are we going to make them from? Because people are going to be making these fuels from these crops. Well, as I said, biodiesel, we've got a better solution than growing crops. We can grow algae. Now, switchgrass. There you go. Sugar beets. Yeah, there's some other good solutions to make ethanol from, huh? In Argentina and other places, they're making it from cane sugar. And there you can get, it's like 8-to-1. You get, for every energy unit you put in to make it from sugar, you get 8 units of energy out. So that's pretty great. Well, now even making it from corn, for every energy unit you put in, you get like 1.2 out. So it is a little bit of ahead, but it's not that ahead. But there's some good things about it too. What do we do with most of the corn we grow in this country? We feed it to cows and pigs. Well, you know what, folks? That's the wrong thing to do. It's poison to them because their bodies cannot digest the sugar, and there's a lot of sugar in corn. So the sugars is actually detrimental to the cows and pigs. So right now, this corn, if we don't use it to make ethanol, we're just going to feed it to cows and pigs, which is bad for them. Well, now let's listen to the whole process of making ethanol. If we take ethanol, or we take corn, we got to dry it out. And how do we dry it out? Well, we need heat. So let's do a power plant, like a small natural gas peak shaving power plant. It's got waste heat from burning the natural gas to make the power. Well, that waste heat can be used to dry the corn. Now the corn goes in, you start to make it into its alcohol. Well, during that process, you make CO2, carbon dioxide. Well, let's bottle it. Let's sell it to Pepsi. Let's sell it to Coke. Let's sell it to the soft drink companies. They want the CO2, so there's a commodity that we get out of it. Well, something else you make when you're producing the alcohol is you get methane. Well, that methane can go right back to the power plant to make power, to help run the plant, as well as to dry the corn on its way in. So that's a good thing to do as well. Now, when you get the alcohol out of it, you've got basically the most pure alcohol you can get. And then you can use that as a displacement for some gasoline in our vehicles. But you also get distiller's grains, or the mash. The leftover mash, now without the sugar in it, is actually a far superior food to feed to the cows and the pigs. So the amount of ethanol we're making right now from corn is actually good for us to do. It's great for us to do because we're feeding the cows and the pigs a much more nutritionally beneficial food. And you could drink it. Yeah, you could drink the alcohol if you want. It's beer. It's good beer, I tell you. That stuff will mess you up. So there is a good place for ethanol, but we just have to be realistic about it. It's very finite when we're making it from croplands. But there's good things about it. And that system I just told you about, it's already happening. Russell, Kansas. Every place that's making ethanol, it's farmers that are doing this, folks. And the farmers are figuring out the best things, throughout history. They don't waste anything. So when you make ethanol in that way, which it is being made, it's a good thing to do. Now, there's another thing that I didn't even mention there. When the leftovers that you stripped from the corn before you start making the alcohol from, there's a little bit of oil in that. So you can actually press that down and make a little bit of biodiesel from the stalks and the stuff that you don't want to make the ethanol from. And there's one new ethanol plant in Colorado right now that has a pad. It was built with a pad so that they could actually do that in the future. They're not doing it yet, but they thought about it. They've got the little pad. They could be making a little bit of biodiesel from the leftovers. Now, another comment was about switchgrass. Right now, one tanker car, one trailer full, not a coal car, what is a big car on the trains. A big car full of corn will make X amount of alcohol, of ethanol. It takes 10 rail cars of switchgrass to make that same amount of alcohol. So there's positives and negatives to all the different options, but we need them all. Let's use them and let's be realistic about them. Let's do this. Let's use it. Let's not badmouth it. The corn for ethanol is not making really the price of food go up. It's the price of oil that's making the price of food go up. We're already at capacity though, so get off it. We're not going to make every car run on ethanol. Can't do it. But we can displace some of that gasoline with ethanol. Now here's a couple examples of how it's done right. In this country, we have flex fuel vehicles. You've heard of them. They have a little badge on them or whatever. Well, they're just a gasoline vehicle that's missing a couple sensors and has stainless steel fuel tubing, maybe a little more robust fuel pump. That's it. So it can run on alcohol or it can run on gasoline. But when it's run on ethanol, you lose horsepower and you lose miles per gallon. So it really puts a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. Because ethanol, as I said before, it's a racing fuel. It's high octane, 130 octane. The moonshiners used it to outrun the cops. Well, this is what they're doing in Sweden. Now, this company, Saab, is owned by GM. But this vehicle right here is only sold in Sweden. I think you might be able to get it in the UK now. But this is the Saab 9.5 BioPower. It has a variable vane turbo, and it has a fuel sensor in the tank. So it can tell what the blend of alcohol or gasoline is in the tank, and it can vary the boost of the turbo. The more alcohol in there, the more boost it gives to the turbo. So with the pure alcohol, you actually get a lot more horsepower and a lot more miles per gallon out of this. So this is a car you want to run ethanol on. But in this country, people are forced to use Chevy truck that runs on ethanol, and you lose horsepower and you lose miles per gallon. So, you get some people disturbed about that, gets them messed up. And so we got to do it like this, folks. And even better than that is the hybrid version of it. Same thing, but now they want to hybridize it. Now that's a pretty good idea because, as I said before, hybrid's kind of like doing less bad. Well, if you're running a cleaner fuel and you're hybridizing it, now you got the best of both worlds. You're getting better fuel economy, and you're using a cleaner, safer, local fuel. So you can see the torque curve and the power curve there. You know, may not mean a whole lot, but yeah, running on pure alcohol is a lot better than running on gasoline. Now here's one of my favorite stations too. This is only about 30 miles away. It's up in Santa Fe. Well, this is a biofuel pump. It has ethanol and it has biodiesel. It has different blends. So you've got ethanol is E10 and you've got E85. So E85 is 85% ethanol with 15% gasoline. That's supposed to be for flex fuel vehicles. But I'm here to tell you folks that any engine, any gasoline engine can burn ethanol for fuel. Just like any diesel engine can run biodiesel, any gasoline engine can run ethanol. Now different blends are going to give you different performance. I've found that between 30 and 70% ethanol is pretty much the best window for most vehicles. Below 30% ethanol, you actually lose horsepower and lose miles per gallon. Above 70% ethanol in your tank, again, you lose horsepower and you lose miles per gallon. Somewhere around 50 to 60% is probably the best. You'd have to test it out yourself. The Kansas Kansas corn growers, they've been testing ethanol in every car you can imagine. They've got Priuses, first, second, and third gen running on E85. And what they've found is that no matter what car you got out, old car fuel tubing, if you don't go over ethanol, it's going to hurt the fuel tubing. It's not going to hurt the carburetors. Because the alcohol is actually not hurting the aluminum or the carburetors. It's its affinity for water. And it's the water in there that etches away the aluminum and can hurt your carburetors. And you get some powdered junk in there if you put up, like my lawnmower. I run E85 through my lawnmower as well as hydrogen, but mostly E85 because it's a little easier to get. And if it sits all winter, you know, I've got to kind of clean out the carburetor in the summer because in the spring when I'm ready to start using it again, because the ethanol, you get this white film, this pasty stuff in it. So if you're using it all the time, it's going to run through and be fine. But if it sits over the winter, you're going to have to do a little maintenance on it. But the little engines, they love the ethanol. The big engines, they can use it too, but you got to be careful with the older vehicles, that rubber fuel tubing and carburetors. But that's what E10's for. Really, you blend your own right at the station. You fill up with E85, and then right next door there's gasoline. So put in enough gasoline to start making your own blend. And as I said, I think it's a local fuel, so you can use a little bit of it, and it's better. Now we're going to move on to a little bit another fuel. It's another step up the fuel hierarchy pyramid. Now this is a picture of a fuel station that, well, it was $1 a gallon then. Right now it's 85 cents in Utah. 85 cents a gallon for natural gas, compressed natural gas. And you get up to 18% better fuel economy on a gallon equivalent of natural gas than you do on gasoline. And it's incredible. Methane is what natural gas is. Methane is 1 carbon and 4 hydrogens. And when you put that through an engine, the carbon, it's so low carbon that your oil doesn't even get dirty. So you can go 20,000 miles or so and your oil still looks clean. Now you can do a mistake though, because your oil still looks clean if you run nothing but methane through your engine, that you can run too long and natural gas burns hotter. So it starts to break down the viscosity, and after a while that'll start to turn your oil acidic. So after a while you do have to change the oil. Even though it still looks clean on the dipstick, well, you got to change it out because it's burning hot, it's burning off the lighter oils, and it's starting to turn acidic. So you do need to change your oil when you're burning natural gas, but it can save you on maintenance, so it'll save you a lot. Here's a natural gas station. I guess it's kind of hard to see, but this is about public refueling. And basically there's about 2,000 natural gas stations around the country right now. We could put a lot more of them in. We need a lot more of them. But this station right here, you can see the hose. It's just hooked up to the truck right there and filling up with natural gas. Here's another way. You can fill up at home. If you've got a natural gas pipeline to your house, you can use this little device. All you need is 220 volt electric and a pipeline. And you're compressing natural gas and you're putting it in your tank. This system puts in about half a gallon an hour. So if you're parked for 8 hours overnight, you get 4 gallons in your tank, which is good enough for most people. This little car right here gets about 38 miles on a gallon equivalent of natural gas. So 4 gallons every night, you got 150 mile range or so pretty easily the next day. So that works for most people. But this is a dedicated fuel vehicle. This vehicle can only run on natural gas. So you may not be able to drive it all around the country very easily. Because if one of the natural gas stations is down, you might be waiting until they fix it or calling the tow truck. So again, multi-fuel and bi-fuel is what works a little better. Now around the world, they're propping themselves up. I have a little concern about what's happening in this country. We seem to be the only country in the world that's trying to destroy itself. We are chipping away at it. Every other country is propping themselves up, and case in point, perfect example is natural gas. Every other country in the world is adding to their natural gas infrastructure, putting more stations out, and they're adding to the vehicles on the road. And all the vehicles they're putting out are biofuel vehicles, so they can run on natural gas or gasoline. You know, they've even got trains, they've even got trucks, they've got planes that run on natural gas. And you can have different forms. You can have compressed natural gas, which is a gaseous fuel, or you can have liquefied natural gas, which is a cryogenic liquid. So it's negative 170 C, it's very cold, but it's more energy dense then. So it works in the big rigs, it works in planes, and that's a way to do it. This country, the United States of America, is the only country in the world where we're losing natural gas infrastructure. And we're actually, small volume manufacturers like myself, we can't keep up with the attrition rate of the old factory vehicles that were being built in this country before. You know, they're going to the crusher faster than we can build them. So we got to turn that trend around for a lot of reasons. But, you know, Ford, GM, Chrysler, they all make natural gas vehicles for every other market around the world. Why don't they do them here? Well, it has to do with that problem back in the 1970s that got started. Now here's a biofuel vehicle. This is a Ford F-150 with 5.4 liter V8, the new 24 valve. It's a great vehicle running on natural gas. This truck on natural gas is about 5 cents a mile to operate. It would be about 35 cents a mile on gasoline. Now compare that to a Prius, getting 50 miles on a $4 a gallon gasoline. Prius is about 9 cents a mile to operate. And that's pretty beneficial too. You don't always get 50 miles a gallon, and gas I think is more than $4 a gallon now. So this truck right here, 5 cents a mile. You got a truck, you can haul your kids, you can tow a boat, you got a little room to play. Prius, 9 cents a mile, using finite toxic gasoline. Which would you rather use? Well, I'd rather have a truck. You can also do Unimogs. You know, this comes from the Unimog. You can get this running on natural gas. And I kind of commented on it before that there's different forms of natural gas. Well, natural gas can come from landfills, it can come from digesters, it can come from pig farms, their waste coming out. There's different forms of biomethane, biogas, natural gas, methane. It's all methane. And it's all coming from methanogenic bacteria, no matter what form is basically, it's methanogenic bacteria is making it. And it's reproducing itself very rapidly. Questar is the gas company in Utah, and they had wells that they were digging into, or they were drilling into and tapping them into about the 50s, and then 20 years ago or so they dried out. The oil, or the oil was dead and gone, they thought. So they capped it, but they've been monitoring it while they go and drill new holes and go get more methane. Well, they've been monitoring it, and now they realize that, whoa, the pressure in that well that they thought they'd depleted is actually higher now than when they started extracting from it. So the theory is right now that methane reproduces itself so fast that it might be a 50-year reproduction cycle to fully reproduce all the methane planet right now. It's reproducing itself anyways. It might be 50 years, it might be longer. But now oil, whether it's biological or geological, crude oil, it has a much longer reproduction cycle to make crude oil. So natural gas is the most plentiful biofuel we have on this planet. It's reproducing itself all the time. And as I said before, if we don't mine it, if we don't grab it, it's going to escape into the atmosphere, and there it does more harm than if we just burn it as a fuel. So it's far better for us to collect it and burn it, even in big things like that. Now, another thing I really like about natural gas is that it's paving the highway back to hydrogen. This bus right here can run on natural gas. They also make these trolleys that run on electric. You can get those too. So depending on the option that works best in your community, you know, you can have the option. But natural gas is paving the highway back to hydrogen because it's the same tanks, it's the same compressors, it's the same fuel tubing, the same regulators. Every component we need for natural gas is a component we need for hydrogen. But the hydrogen components are to tighter tolerances and much higher pressure. So we need to fully develop the natural gas in order to get back to hydrogen. Now hydrogen, if you look up the definition of, it's that which creates water. H2O is water, 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen. Hydrogen is a diatomic molecule. It doesn't exist on its own, nowhere on Earth. It's always either with itself, H2, or with something else. O, H2O, water, or hydrogen sulfide, hydrogen this, hydrogen that. Hydrogen is in everything. Everything around us has hydrogen. So what do? We have to mine that hydrogen out. We have to be resourceful. We have to think of ways to get that hydrogen and use it how we want to. But the greatest thing is that there's so many different ways to get hydrogen. It's very valuable to us because you can mine it in a lot of different ways. And then there's also so many different ways to use it. Once you have hydrogen, you can chemically combine it in a fuel cell, or you can burn it in an engine. You can heat your home. You can cook your food. Lots of good things. So here's my focus is on renewable hydrogen, using the sun and the wind. My favorite hydrogen station in the country is down in Phoenix, Arizona. They use the sun to electrolyze water. That hydrogen ends up being less than a quarter of the price of gasoline today for solar hydrogen. Where when you make hydrogen from finite fossil fuels, it's up to 50 times the price of gasoline. So why would President Bush talk about making hydrogen from coal and oil? Maybe he has something to do with those industries, huh? Well, here's a cool product I'd like to support. It's not really out on the market yet, but right now I can do a hydrogen filling station for you. It's $250,000. These folks should come down to about $50,000. That's still a bit more than that natural gas station I showed you, that home natural gas filling station. That starts at about $5,000. So these hydrogen components are expensive, but this is going to bring it down a lot because it's making hydrogen direct to pressure. When you electrolyze water with energy into it, electricity into it, it makes bubbles on the anode and the cathode. Well, when you can do that under pressure, the bubbles are smaller, and under the heat and the pressure, you actually produce more hydrogen, more oxygen at a faster rate. So making hydrogen direct to pressure is the way to go because you can get 10,000 psi hydrogen right from the electrolysis machine. No compressor required, so you don't have to put any energy into a compressor, you don't have to have maintenance, you don't have to have the noise and the sound pollution of a compressor. So hydrogen is, even better than natural gas. Now some people are talking about making hydrogen stations available, and other people are actually using hydrogen. But all these cars can run on hydrogen. You've got internal combustion up the top, and you got fuel cell vehicles, and like this guy, I don't know if you recognize him, but even old oil men are standing behind hydrogen. What is his name? J.R. Ewing? Now, here's my truck, and I'd like to welcome you guys to come outside afterwards. I give you a tour of my truck. I'd love to answer your questions there and give you the answers that you need. But this is a multi-fuel vehicle. Now, primarily I run on natural gas because I can fill up my tanks for $15 and go 500 miles. Same two tanks I can fill with hydrogen. In Phoenix, Arizona, I can fill up with $14 of hydrogen and go 175 miles. Same tanks. So that's kind of the drawback is hydrogen takes up 3 times the volume of natural gas. And another drawback is that natural gas takes up 3 times the volume of gasoline. So if you see the tanks in the back of my truck, you see they take up more volume. That's really the one downside. Everything else is good. It's cleaner, it's cheaper, it's safer, it's local, it supports our economy, keeps more money in your pocketbook, increases our nation's security. But yeah, it takes up more volume. But that doesn't have to be a problem. Now, ethanol is the last fuel I use, and kind of as a last resort, so I don't have to use any gasoline. But I'm on my 5th tank of ethanol right now this year. My truck is going to break over 200,000 miles on this trip before I get home. And so I primarily run on natural gas, and then hydrogen is the second most used fuel, and then ethanol. 3, 4, 5, 6 tankfuls a year. We can do that. If every vehicle in the country used 5 or 6 tankfuls of ethanol a year, but you primarily ran on natural gas, that's how much ethanol we can make. But that way we don't need any gasoline. But this truck could use gasoline if you had to, but I choose not to. Now, one important thing is when we're choosing local fuels first, even if you have to use gasoline or diesel, choose from a local source. Go to Sinclair because it comes from Wyoming. Go to Tesoro because it comes from Alaska. So if you do use petroleum, make sure it's local. That's the way to do it. Now there's some great things about hydrogen. When you run hydrogen through an engine, it runs cooler and there's no carbon in it, so your oil doesn't get dirty, it doesn't break down its viscosity. You'd never have to change your oil if you ran nothing but hydrogen through an engine. This car's got over 200,000 kilometers on it. No oil degradation. Every 50,000 miles he changes the filter and tops it off. This is Roy McAllister's car from the American Hydrogen Association, 1970s Dodge. And here's the world's most efficient hydrogen car. It's a fuel cell. It uses, 100 grams of hydrogen to go 100 kilometers. And so that shows how efficient a fuel cell can be. But today, the internal combustion engine's right up there. And because we can run multiple fuel sources through an internal combustion engine, it actually works. Whereas, like this car, this is a dedicated fuel vehicle. It can only run on hydrogen, or it can only run on natural gas, or it can only run on propane. It chooses one or the other because they optimize the engine, they tune it. Well, this is now the world's 3rd fastest hydrogen car. It had such a short range that when it was on the Bonneville salt flats, it got all the way up to top speed, ran out of hydrogen, and had to coast in like the last 3 miles through the traps, the speed traps. So this one I actually think is probably the world's fastest hydrogen car, but they're going to have to go prove it again. They're going to need a shorter test track, though, because they can get up to top speed a lot quicker than how long the test track is out on the salt flats. Now, BMW, they wanted to show that they could do this, too. So they set some records, a bunch of records, but this is not the world's fastest hydrogen car anymore either. But look at the date. The date's what's important about this. September 19th, 2004. We'll get back to that in a second. Now here's the world's fastest hydrogen vehicle. It is a fuel cell vehicle. It's in a Ford, and it's setting some records. But my truck set a record too. And if you see, it was 4 days before BMW did their record. So I think they didn't want to be shown up. We went and set the altitude record. This is the highest hydrogen vehicle. We drove over Imogene Pass in Telluride. Now, we're probably going to run out of time here, so I might not get to talk to you about all the products that we build and show, but this is kind of a list of them. And we can go through them in the fuel hierarchy pyramid again. But my truck is basically a prototype. It's a Venturi-style system. This is the regulator, the all-in-wonder unit. It takes 3,600 psi in, 4-stage regulator down to atmospheric, through this vapor hose into the Venturi, which is kind of like a dry gas carburetor. There's a combustible gas detector there if there's a leak. There's 2 tanks in the back of my bed. As I said, it holds about 6 kilos of hydrogen, which is good for about 175 miles of range on hydrogen. Those same 2 tanks, though, can hold 24-gallon equivalents of natural gas, which is good for 500 miles. Or they can hold any blend of the two. You run on whatever you got. It's a great deal. Now, we can take existing natural gas vehicles like this Honda Civic, and we can upgrade it so you could also run on hydrogen or blends of hydrogen and natural gas. That's a good thing. We can hydrogen boost. This is a diesel engine. Under construction right here, you can see the hydrogen tank and the tubing that's not installed yet. But that vehicle, we can boost the performance. No matter what it is, a gasoline engine or a diesel engine, we add a little hydrogen to it, you get more complete combustion of your baseline fuel. So this vehicle right here got about 9 miles on a gallon of diesel, gets 19 miles on biodiesel with hydrogen boosting. So that's pretty good. But we can also do a gasoline car. But we do pure hydrogen, folks. Pure hydrogen stored on board the vehicle. That's what's safe. That's what works. There's a lot of people out there talking about HHO, hydroxy, Brown's gas, Rhodes gas, whatever you want to call it. You got to remember the original name. The original name for that was Kanal gas from Germany. Kanal translates into boom, bang. Because hydrogen and oxygen, they combine all on their own. You don't even need a spark. So be careful of that stuff if you are playing with it, because it goes boom. Pure hydrogen is a lot safer. Now this is a H2 protium package. This takes an internal combustion engine. We do sequential multi-port injection on it. It can run hydrogen, or it can run natural gas, or you could put ethanol in your gas tank, or you could still run gasoline if you had to. But this is the most useful. The H2 protium package. On hydrogen, you lose about 50% of the horsepower compared to on gasoline. So we have the deuterium package, where we add a supercharger. We increase the compression of the engine. Now you have about the same amount of horsepower on hydrogen as you originally had on gasoline, but you can still use natural gas or blends of the two. You can still use gasoline or ethanol, whatever you want. So this vehicle works anywhere you want. Now the ultimate, this is for the people that want to burn rubber instead of burning gasoline. With our H2 tritium package, we use direct injection. We can get you up to 50% more horsepower out of the engine using hydrogen than you could ever get out of the engine on gasoline. So folks, hydrogen is the fuel you want to use. I mean, that's pretty cool. Now, there's a lot of different ways to store hydrogen. We're going to briefly go through them. BMW chooses liquid. Liquid's very cold, cryogenic, negative 252 degrees centigrade, so it's almost absolute zero. They actually don't have a robot doing the refueling anymore. They've insulated it well enough that they can do it without the robot, but that's kind of the drawback that it's cold. Now, you can also store hydrogen as a solid, just like any element. You got a liquid, you got a solid. Well, you can also have gas. Well, solid is very heavy, though. According to this chart, the tanks in the back of my truck, instead of holding 6 kilos of hydrogen, they could hold 18 kilos of hydrogen if they were a metal hydride system. So I could go 500 miles on hydrogen? Well, maybe. Because the weight penalty is what's important about this. It's 9 to 1. So the tanks in the back of my truck weigh about 400 pounds. If they were a metal hydride system, it'd weigh almost 4,000 pounds. So metal hydride has a weight penalty. Now, there's other lithium buckyballs that people are talking about. There's other molecular frameworks, such as lithium. And there's carbon nanotubes and other stuff that we can store hydrogen. But what really works today is compressed. Compressed hydrogen I really like because it's compatible with compressed natural gas. So at this station, we can fill up my dad's hydrogen Hummer in Chula Vista with hydrogen. Hydrogen's available at 3,600, 5,000, and 10,000 psi. 5,000 is most realistic right now. The 10,000 psi stuff's a little expensive. But these 3 tanks right here will hold enough hydrogen to take this Hummer about 75 miles. Those same 3 tanks will hold enough natural gas to go about 210 miles. There's a little combustible gas detector right there. If it is leaking, you're notified. Up here, there's a monitor. But there's some safety features that you need to, when you're working with the gaseous fuels. It's a much safer fuel, but you have to take different safety precautions. So, that's what I've kind of listed here. And it's safe. We just have to have different safety precautions. Here's a fill receptacle for natural gas. Here's the hydrogen one. Check valve right here, because you see both of those go to the same line into the tanks. And then this line is the PRD. if those tanks were under fire or flame, the pressure inside could build up so much that they would blow. Well, we have little lead plugs in the PRDs that melt out at temperature and lets the fuel go right up out there. So it's all good. So even if you're in a fire, you're okay. And there's a lot of other things we can do. We like building hot rods, so we can make them run well for you. Now this is a hydrogen station we've been filling out at for quite a while. This is at Sunline Transit, 1000 Palms, California. They have natural gas right here, and they have hydrogen right here, and they have liquid natural gas right there. And then this is the station in Phoenix, Arizona. Check out the price, $2.25 for a kilo of hydrogen. 1 kilo of hydrogen has the same BTUs as a gallon of gasoline. But a kilo of hydrogen would take my truck 39 miles, or a gallon of gasoline would only go about 18. So for $2.25 for a kilo of solar hydrogen, that's less than a quarter of the price of gasoline, folks. Good deal. But what we got to do, this is the answer. We got to turn all these gas stations into fuel stores. Because you go to the grocery store and you have your choice of how many different kinds of milk, 10, 12. Well, here, you should be able to go to this fuel store and choose whatever fuel you got. That's what works. And our multi-fuel vehicles allow that to happen with multi-fuel stores. And that's what we're going for. So, all these fuels are cheaper, they're all cleaner, they're all safer, they're all local. So every one of them makes sense somewhere. I would have to say that the natural gas makes the most economic sense. And, so kids don't let kids breathe petroleum exhaust. I mean, it's deadly. So drive clean. Thanks a lot, folks. I don't know if we have enough time because I want to get on with the social, but as I said, I would like to answer a bunch of questions out at my truck, give you a tour of it if you'd like. Be happy to answer any questions best I can.
Yeah, we really don't have time for questions, but we do have the social starting shortly. It's in the ballroom next door. And then the other thing that you need to know is we are asking everybody to be considerate of the person behind you when you're picking up your food, because we've got a lot of folks here. And the third thing I need to mention is that the store